Spyro 2 next when it came to going back to Insomniac, but controversial opinion, the latter two-thirds of the Dragon's original outing is filled with enough backtracking and annoying filler that I'm saving those for later. I don't return to the Purple One's second and third installments all that often because I find a form of tedium to be suffered when dealing with the weaker aspects of those games. Hot take, I enjoy Spyro 1 the most, though I'm not saying that 2 and 3 are bad, far from it, but to cut a goose chase down to size, I think Insomniac hit their stride with their entries during the third mascot boom. Funnily enough, we begin with the weakest of the Ratchet and Clank games, giving a bit away of what I think about this title right out of the gate. At least you now know what to expect, unlike what's possibly happening on screen right now. Scripting humor. So anyway, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Or don't. I ain't your Uncle Fester, who may or may not have spent time lost in the Bermuda Triangle. For a bit of a brief recap, you might want to watch my LTA on Spyro the Dragon to get a shorthand on Insomniac as a company. Ted Price, the brothers Hastings, Mark Cerny, all the stars, as I will be having to skip around a bit since I'm jumping straight from Spyro to Ratchet. That leaves 2 games out in the rain for a later date. The Spyro sequels, Ripto's Rage and Year of the Dragon. It's somewhat comprehensive, as I do cover a bit of Disruptor, a game I know I'm not going to play anytime soon, and the birth of Insomniac as a company as well, so it covers a good portion of the bases. Shameless plug. Watch LTA Spyro. It's a fun video. It's thumbnail as shit, but I mean, the cover to Aaron Beauregard books aren't welcoming, but the stories themselves are a fun time? Questioning looks aside, as y'all probably think I'm a psychopath for thinking Splatterpunk is enjoyable, we'll actually have to start back around where we left off with Spyro, specifically with its development team. If you remember, Spyro 1's team was dreadfully small. While I threw some names around, I didn't specifically give a number. That number, mentioned by Al Hastings for IGN's Always Independent, the story of Insomniac games, was around 8 or 10 employees on the first one, probably more like 10. I think by the last one it was 20 or 25. And that doesn't include Mark Cerny, so all you have is Ted, the Hastings, Kirsten, Matt, and Craig, to name those I've mentioned previously. Someone who I haven't brought up is Brian Allgeier. He too was on the cutting room floor for the Spyro series. Heads up, I will be paraphrasing a bit here from the Dev Game Club podcast, episode 274, as it is audio only. So to start off with, Brian's career has the same funny start as Insomniac, just replace the 3DO with the Philips CDI. He wanted to get into making movies, so after getting his degree in video and illustration from Savannah College of Art and Design, this good old Dayton boy, shout out to the heartland of America, Ohio's B-City, he moved to California and started shopping around, landing at Philips Interactive, due to impressing the company with his pixel artwork on Scooby-Doo. Kinda gives it away that his first game was Hanna-Barbera's Cartoon Carnival, a 93 release, coincidentally the same year as the 3DO. Yeah, the CDI was an invention of 1990, possibly making it the first CD-based console. For comparison, the Sega CD was 91 and an add-on, the Jaguar 93, which is cheating a bit as the add-on was later in the console's def, same as the 3DO, and the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn 94. It was advanced tech, even if the outcome was more than subpar. A whole generation raised on YTP. Still, credit where it is due, Brian's work landed him the lead artist and animator roles for Cartoon Carnival, 94's Merlin's Apprentice, and 95's Labyrinth of Crete. With his time at Philips, Brian came into contact with Michael John, a producer for Sony Interactive Entertainment America and Universal Interactive. There's our Spyro connection, but it isn't fully connected. Leaving Phillips for Blue Shift in 96, Brian would help design 98's Running Wild, published by 989 Studios, a subdivision of Sony Computer Entertainment America. Running Wild is interesting as a microcosm of things to come. It has a challenge mode, it's a racing game, and the soundtrack was composed by David Berjou, bka Core. Some of these elements would seep into Spyro when Brian joined Insomniac, but would come to the forefront with Ratchet and Clank, the challenge mode, a few racing minigames, and Core as composer. Speaking of Brian's joining Insomniac, he would be with the team for 99 Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage not even a year after Running Wild. That means he was quickly snatched up by Insomniac because Spyro 2 only had about a year for development. While the interview with DGC doesn't go into how Brian went from Blue Shift to Insomniac, I personally surmise that it was a case of a producer spotting his work and sending him to I don't want to say better team, but a place where his talents could shine brighter. Particularly Michael John, as he had already seen the work Brian was capable of, giving him a good word to Insomniac. Around the time of Brian shacking up with Insomniac as a designer, the team was going through Spyro 2 and 3 and started hitting a wall of sorts. Spyro had kinda run his course. The talking heads of Ted Price and Alan Brian Hastings for G4 TV's Icon series give us this that I will paraphrase as there's no transcript. Ted confers that Insomniac was scraping the bottom of the barrel for ideas when it came to Year of the Dragon, while Al notes that the team wanted to tackle something new. If I hadn't stated it previously, Insomniac didn't own the rights to Spyro. They made the series on Universal's dime, akin to Naughty Dog with Crash. That's why both continued after the original teams left. See my Crash Twinsanity LTA. Free from Universal shackles and beginning their direct relationship with Sony, Insomniac had a bit of a non-starter problem. Context-wise, Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon was a late PlayStation 1 release. The turn of the millennium to generalize, October of 2000 to be exact. A little piece of hardware called the PlayStation 2 was already out in Japan, with Year of the Dragon having to share store shelves with the greatest console ever, as it had just been cleared for American sales. That's a brown pants moment, even if Insomniac had been mulling over a few ideas for their i5 title. The first that usually gets brought up is Monster Night, seen as the seed for it was planted in 99. Conceptually interesting on a historical front, like former IGN reporter Colin Moriarty, yes, that one that pivoted into sacred symbols and is also the writer for the Always Independent article, Monster Night's whole entire design doc can be looked at right now. It was a bit like Pokemon / SMT and Zelda, aiming for a somewhat older audience that had grown up with Spyro. Yet it and the following title, Girl with a Stick, just weren't meant to be. There wasn't a lot of passion from the team. Back to the Always Independent article, Ted tells Colin the tale of Girl with a Stick. We came up, after a lot of brainstorming, with this concept of a girl who has a magical staff and performs katas, martial arts moves, to generate magic spells. Also, the core gameplay involved just basic combat with the staff. As far as I recall, that was the main thrust, the core mechanics. There wasn't a whole lot else. We had beast riding, and we had giant creatures that you could take down with magic and other abilities that you'd learn. But it was fairly one-dimensional when it came to the mechanics that we were discussing. We were more focused on the world and the characters in the story, which ended up being a mistake. More bluntly, Brian hits a quotable with this line: "This project wasn't going to survive. I remember doing a lot of minute adjustments on a map and putting the final touches on it, thinking, this is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This is pointless." There just wasn't a good core identity to the game. Was it Tomb Raider meets Zelda? Was this for an older audience? What's the overall genre? Etc., etc. And though the team wanted to try and step away from the platformer genre, it was obvious that the shift in the pendulum made the grass left looking greener by the second. This was months after Insomniac had presented Girl with a Stick to Sony, so it was safer to head back into pastures familiar and begin anew with the threat of the chopping block looming in the distance. Sony was willing to back the ambitious team, but there needed to be results. So, how about a space adventure where a character not too dissimilar to Marvin the Martian hops around from planet to planet finding new weapons and gadgets? That's the idea Brian Hastings shot out. This moment was recalled during an interview conducted by Big Gaz of Game Planet. Actually, we had already been working on a very different game and ran into a brick wall. The game we began developing on the PlayStation 2 just wasn't fun, nor was it what most people wanted to do. Then Brian Hastings suggested we do a game about a character who has lots of cool weapons and gadgets and flies a spaceship from planet to planet. As soon as he put out that idea, everyone got really excited and started contributing ideas. As a result, the pre-production phase went very quickly. A few of the other inspirations as laid out by Brian were, surprisingly enough, Conker's Bad Fur Day. In particular, one of the worst parts of that game, the graveyard shotgun section. It sucks so much. God, I'll be skinned for my opinions on Conker. And Iron Giant. Off that idea, character artist Dave Girton came up with the early sketches for what would be the dynamic duo for the game, Ratchet and Clank. John Fiorito and Chad Desern also threw their hats in when it came to concept art, allowing me to segue into team size, as around this point, Insomniac had around 35 people on payroll, jumping up to 45 by the end of the game's development. There was a synergy to the team, everyone getting a chance to throw out ideas for consideration or implementation. Brian, having already paid his dues, was bumped up to lead designer and director, while Brian Hastings alongside John Lally were handling the story. Still programming the whole framework was Alan Bryan of the Hastings brothers, where one of the more interesting tales connected to Ratchet and Clank was birthed forth. The rivalry of Insomniac and Naughty Dog doesn't exist in my mind simply because both companies were closer relatives than the Habsburgs. Having to start from square one, as none of what was used for Girl with a Stick could be transferred over to RNC, was a dire scenario for the team and Ted Price. But as if answering the silent distress signal, Jason Rubin, Naughty Dog's co-founder, called up Ted to ask if he wanted some help. Ted tells the story to Gamasutra. Shortly after we decided to start over, Jason Rubin, Naughty Dog's co-founder, called me and asked if we'd be interested in checking out the technology they developed for Jak and Daxter. He explained that Naughty Dog didn't want anything from us other than a gentleman's agreement to share with them any improvements we made to whatever we borrowed, plus any of our own technology we felt like sharing. In an industry as competitive as ours, things like this just don't happen. Sharing was indeed caring, Insomniac borrowing Naughty Dog's code to effectively jumpstart Ratchet and Clank alongside providing the legwork for Jak and Daxter 2. It wouldn't be a tale of Insomniac or Naughty Dog without Mark Cerny, as he helped Ratchet and Clank in regards to the first working prototype. There wasn't a lot of time on Insomniac's plate to get the idea back to Sony for production, so Mark suggested making a shell level using Kirwan's Metropolis City, one of the busiest levels visually that makes it seem like a heavily interactive section of gameplay. From there, it was off to the races as Sony approved the idea, and lo and behold, Insomniac had another hit on their hands. Ratchet and Clank 1 was released in America on November 4th, 2002 for the PlayStation 2, with other countries getting it later in the year. By '03, it was a greatest hits. Of course, it has been re-released a number of times, particularly as part of the Ratchet and Clank collection developed by Idle Minds, and has been remade for the PlayStation 4 and adapted for film. Busting out my PlayStation 3, I played Ratchet and Clank 1 via the collection, which has its own quirks like a number of the other mascot collections like Jank and Sly. More glitches than in the original. Our story begins, God, it's been a while since I've said that, on a backwater planet by the name of Veldon. Local population, I don't know, enough to have impact in small elections, but the Interplanetary Alliance kinda forgets that the dirtball exists. On it, a Lombax, as we will later learn, by the name of Ratchet is fixing up a ship so he can hop, skip, and jump his way off to somewhere new. Unfortunately, when buying all the parts for his model kit, he left out the robotic ignition switch, leaving the craft for show. Meanwhile, on a nearby planet barren except for a massive robot factory, some ones and zeros get twisted, spitting out a tiny little dude who, unlike his brethren, has free will. I say this because he spots another different bot, an infobot to be exact, and recoils from the horror of its recordings, to the point of an escape attempt, getting our tiny bot a one-way crash landing to Veldon. Seeing the fiery wreckage go down, Ratchet ventures forth and recovers the toaster, the two having their meet cute before agreeing to a partnership. The newly appointed Clank will act as the robotic ignition switch for Ratchet's ship if Ratchet brings him to intergalactic superhero Captain Quark so he can stop Chairman Drac, the leader of the Blarg race.
Interesting.
Yay!
You're quite handy with your wrench.
You bet. I built that ship with it.
Currently, I'm in search of someone who could be of assistance in saving the solar system. Do you know where I might find that fellow?
Well, he's on the radio every week. Other than that, no. Hey, what's with all this save the solar system stuff anyway?
Hello, citizens of... My race, the Blarg, have a small problem. Our planet has become so polluted, overpopulated, and poisonous that we are no longer able to dwell here. But I, Chairman Drac, have a solution. We are constructing a pristine new world using the choicest planetary components available.
Unfortunately, Ratchet's first trip off Veldon to the planet of Novalis is as eventful as Clank's race to Veldon, leaving the two stranded as the planet is overrun with Blargian forces. No matter, the two help a Novalis representative, earning them a ship and infobot for Kerwan, where the captain did a commercial for Al's RoboShack, and giving a plumber some bus fare in exchange for info on planet Iridia. Speeding off to Kerwan's metropolis, Quark's obviously no longer planet-side, but Al upgrades Clank with a helipack, allowing our duo to catch a rogue infobot for Eudora. The lush meadows and forests of the Green Thumb are getting stripped away as we speak, but as this is game progression sensitive, Ratchet and Clank complete the Quark-branded obstacle course for the swing shot. Or run through the fitness track and then pay the captain's trainer for the gadget. Cab fare ain't cheap, and hey, you are taxed for your gold medals. Still putting off Eudora, planets can repopulate. Skid McMarks and his agent complete the hat trick of landings, the two separated on the desert swamp of Iridia. Border first, excising the sand sharks harassing Skid's ego, he gifts Ratchet a board that'll help with proving to the agent that Ratchet can be the next hoverboard star. He needs the trophy from Rilgar's Blackwater City tournament. Rilgar is...
Pose.
I know I put these star charts somewhere. That in the back of our twosome's mind, and with the trespasser in hand, Eudora's occupation by the Blarg is easily shut down. Drek's lieutenant putting up less of a fight than Terry hints.
You sure showed him.
I suppose I did.
Is your current occupation leaving a rotten taste in your mouth? Then you need to know about BTS, Blog Tactical Research Station. Hi, I'm Supreme Executive Chairman Drek.
Ooh! And he dropped an infobot for a Blargian research facility, giving us our next location for the two's adventure. Split into 3 parts, a spacewalk conducted by Clank gets Ratchet the Hydro Displacer, the two fight through the mutant animal pens and rescue a scientist for a coupon on the grind boots, and blow up a war cruiser, incidentally getting Rilgar's infobot. While Ratchet easily smokes the competition for the trophy, getting a sand mouse summoner from the agent on Iridia for his troubles, Quark happens to be the celebrity guest for the tournament. Heroism isn't a known bill pair. Sponsorships and spokesman deals, that's where it's at. Seemingly aware of Drek's relocation plans for the Blarg, Quark sweet-talks Ratchet and Clank into tackling his real obstacle course on Umbris to prove that they are hero material.
You are a true hero in the making.
Really? You mean I could be famous?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, here, take this. What makes one man toil in obscurity while another becomes a hero? Is it strength, compassion, determination, or just pure blind luck? Wise men through the ages have struggled with that very question, but Captain Quark knows the secret. That's why he's been able to defeat more despots, rescue more damsels in distress, and save more civilizations than any other hero in the galaxy.
If the literal death traps didn't tip the duo off about Quark's maliciousness, his foreseen betrayal does. He's in the pocket of Drek, but leaving Gravity, or a Blargian snagglebeast in this case, to do all the work of killing your marks was a poor decision on the captain's part. Alive, though fractured, Ratchet and Clank commandeer Quark's backup cruiser and loot his infobot for Batalia. Another war-torn planet, there ain't much the heroes, hero and annoying prick, can do besides giving out more bus fare, this time for a deserter, getting his infobot for Gaspar, and regrouping with the commander of the Batalia forces, who sends them off to Orxon as the path into the city is Magna Rail only. Blasted bolt keeping the drawbridge down, as if knowing that the pilot helmet from Gaspar will be needed in the near future. Ratchet nabs it before taking a trip to Orxon, so that Clank can get the Magna boots and an infobot for sunny Poketaru, home to sand, surf, and ravenous puffoids and brainy Psychtopie. So, any beachfront resort. Sun and fun has to wait, though, as the Blargian forces on Batalia need repelling. Oh look, the plumber's back, and rewards Ratchet and Clank with the metal detector for stopping the invasion. Hooray? Free to visit the resort, the owner requests an escort from Ratchet back to the front desk so that something can be done about the toxic waste ships polluting Poketaru. As Captain Planet's jurisdiction is strictly to Earth, the Lombax takes the problem head on, donning the pilot helmet to shoot down the ships, but not before buying the thruster pack for Clank. With fresh oxygen on standby, Ratchet takes a crack at Orxon now, chasing down the infobot for Hoven. As the Blargs have built a low-rent Exterminatus option, Ratchet and Clank need to shut that shit down, which they do, finding a free-floating infobot for Gimlick Base near planet Ultanus' orbit. Quark has been elected to lead the assault on the defenseless population, but gets tied up by Ratchet and Clank, the Lombax finally getting his revenge and seeing how dangerous Drek is, with an infobot showing the aftermath of Ultanus' destruction.
Hello, Captain Ratchet. Come and get me, hero.
Perhaps we could obtain a ship in there.
Great idea. Let's go.
Hey, Ratchet, buddy, old pal. Why don't we just call it a day and let bygones be bygones? Mayday! Mayday! Well, Ratchet, I'd say you passed the test. Oh, boy.
Yes! Quark is history.
Despite my earlier criticism, I must admit, your piloting skills are improving.
I knew you'd come around.
But that has not helped us locate Drek.
Come on, Clank. Can't you just once relax and enjoy a little success? Hey, you want to catch Drek? Betcha this baby can do it.
This is Darla Gratch reporting live from Gorda City. This once peaceful planet is being torn apart today in an unprovoked attack.
Yes, I know. It is worse than I expected, too.
Look, maybe you were right. This is a lot bigger than you or me. I was really selfish focusing on Quark.
Planetside, a horrific lightning storm keeps Clank confined to the duo's new ship, leaving Ratchet alone in his scavenging efforts. Never mind the fact that Ultanus's robotic defense grid is still up and doesn't eat stray bolts from the blue. Ratchet has Link's rules applied to him. Besides a wafer-thin disguised Quark selling a PDA, Ratchet's efforts give the bare minimum. An infobot for the Blargian robot production plant, Quartu. Presumably next to its sister planets, Tarvada and Picto. Ask your parents to explain that one. Clank's homecoming is met with one batch of superweapon destruction, though if the robot and his furry compatriot went inside the factory, they'll need a hologeist from the Gadgetron HQ on Kalibo 3. One hologeist from the Gadgetron HQ on Kalibo 3, Clank completes his return with a reunion with his mother. I wonder who his dad is. Time will tell. If I've said it once, I'm saying it again. Another infobot is given to our heroes, this time for the Blargian fleet carrying their almost complete new home planet. Turns out, Veldin has been awarded by the universe the perfect celestial location. That won't fly for Ratchet to see his home destroyed by Drek, so he and Clank race down to where this whole journey started to finally confront the chairman. Turns out, this whole new planet deal is one giant scam. Drek purposely ruined Orxon for a big payday, and is planning to do the same to the new Blarg homeworld in an infinite money glitch, but gnawing at the ankles of big business is Ratchet and Clank, who put a stop to Drek.
So it has come to this. Once I step on this ignition switch, a countdown will commence. The end of which signals the destruction of your pitiful world.
There must be another way to make a home for your people.
You think that's what this is about? Who do you think polluted our last world? I did. This is about one thing and one thing only. Cash, and lots of it. You see, I've been paid for every square inch of my new world. Once the inhabitants move in, I will begin polluting this world as well. Then the whole thing starts all over again. Ah, brilliant.
Why, you evil little...
Save it, Clank. We have to stop that timer.
Ratchet?
What's up? You know, this time I am thinking what you're thinking.
In the final encounter, however, Clank took some battle damage and needs repairs, and though the story tries to frame Ratchet as uncaring, did you really think that these two wouldn't become the bestest of friends by the end? Humorously, our story ends with Ratchet and Clank enjoying some downtime, or they would if they didn't have to suffer through watching an infomercial for Gadgetron's personal hygienator as tested by Quark. Could be worse, as testing a crotchetizer leaves more than a burning itch down there. There's something funny about the Ratchet and Clank series in that the original quadrilogy, so this game up to Deadlocked, is about Ratchet's journey to becoming a proper hero like an in his prime Captain Quark. Going with this analogy, or in general the hero's journey as outlined by Joseph Campbell, no relation. We can frame this singular adventure in Ratchet's life as around a small piece of the circular graph. I'm going with this wording as while Ratchet and Clank 1 does do a full lap, as you have the same ups and downs that match pit stops familiar within the archetypal story down to a T, Ratchet meeting Clank is clearly the call to adventure, the portrayal of Quark as the Abyss, the destroyed city as atonement, and the return to Veldin is, well, the return. It doesn't seem like Ratchet has filled in the shoes left by Quark when the future Mustachio defeats Drac. Ratchet, though he does do the right thing by the end of the story, is still quite rough around the edges to the degree that even if I think he's a good person deep in his heart, there's the specter of self-gain that frames a degree of the Lombax's actions. For a word that our fuzzball isn't in this particular outing, Paragon. There's way too much personal motivation from Ratchet for me to quantify him as an out-and-out hero. And you see that as such with a lot of the tech that motivates Ratchet to continue going after Quark and Drac. The Lombax is far more excited to get his hands on the pilot helmet due to its cyber new type qualities than because it gets him and Clank closer to the chairman. Pokataru, anyone? It takes a deep cut for Ratchet to finally see how dangerous Drac is, highlighting that if Veldin wasn't in the perfect spot for the Blarg's new planet, I doubt our guy would be as encouraged to go after the slimy businessmen. He probably still would, but at the behest of Clank, who is the lawful good half of our duo. Ironically, it is the sidekick who's the more heroic of the two, as Clank has no legitimate reason to go after Drac, but does so because it is the right thing to do. Selfless is an apt word for Clank. Contrast that with Ratchet, who's far more selfish, and you get a cute little observation in that the one who should be chasing down the bad guy because of the connectivity the two have, like Ratchet should have put 2 and 2 together that his planet wasn't going to be safe at all if Drac is hitting so many in the galaxy, is only running the rat race out of a sense of opportunity to see the galaxy and what it has to offer. New planets, new people, new technology. It's the one who shouldn't care that is the most proactive. Clank technically doesn't have a home as he came out the robotic womb running for his life, so he really shouldn't care about how many worlds are getting mined for the new Blarg planet, but he bears the cross of empathy and wants to shut down Drac ASAP. Before you think I'm completely praising this dynamic though, it can't be understated how much of a little shit Ratchet is in this title, to the point that it leads me back to the above questioning over whether he is a classical hero or not, or possibly if he even is hero material. He gives Clank no benefit of the doubt when the duo gets tricked by Quark, a deception that anyone would have and could have fallen for, seeing as the captain is the most well-known hero in the galaxy, his face stapled across posters, commercials, TV and radio shows, possibly Gadgetron products, this pair of underwear I have on right now, and then proceeds to needle the little robot over every minor inconvenience. There is a thin line to walk with having the main character of your story be objectionable. Usually a point is being made to be showcased. Travis' touchdown in my No More Heroes video is a phenomenal callback to this dilemma, as to offset just how much of a scumbag human being the Crownless King is with his love of battle and propensity for killing. He's fun to watch. The softer sides of Travis with his otaku nature, the social circle he hangs around, and commitment to anything big or small like the day jobs or his cat help to diminish the abhorrently vile things he does to climb up the rankings. Quick quote, as it is a perfect encapsulation of this, even if it is from Desperate Struggle and not the first game. Some people fuck at funerals. I cut off heads. He's witty too, fitting the hats of a warrior poet and a nerd at the same time. And at the end of the day, Travis's journey through the UAA magnifies how his one-track mind drags him under the muck and mire, turning the supposed promised land into a hell on bare feet. If you want to go further back into the catalog, Fuminori and Saya are another perfect example, showing the character evolution from sympathetic to apathetic. I would argue that my own observation of the series gives Ratchet at least something to hang on to deal with his unlikability in this title, because what other defense does the Lombax have? My framing gives him the benefit of the doubt growing into the hero role, but I'm looking at Ratchet retroactively with Commando, Arsenal, and Deadlock looming in the future. It's only mildly called attention to within this title, like with Ultanis, and really only Ultanis. He goes well beyond acceptable levels of annoyance when dealing with betrayal, is so decidedly ungenerous with his flippancy in regards to the likes of Novalis and Batalia's war-torn states, and takes out all his frustrations on Clank, who doesn't deserve it. They're both in the same Star Cruiser, but Ratchet's short-sightedness and lack of what feels like logical thinking, simply putting two and two together to piece Quark to Drek, and Drek is the cause of the twosome's problems, and, well, Ratchet, you got tricked by Quark as well. You have a poster of the guy in your home. You didn't see through his conniving either, you dumbass. Makes him an aggravating vessel to play through. In essence, Ratchet is no different from Quark. Both are in this entry extremely self-centered, only really care for tangible rewards, whether it be money or new tech, fame, and living an easy life, and ironically enough, are dragged around by someone else who has a greater goal in mind. That's why, of the two, I find Quark the one to pay attention to, unlike Drek. Drek's fine, he's a standard evil corporate figurehead, but there's nothing to extrapolate from when you put him next to Ratchet, unlike Quark. I feel like this statement can be labeled at Clank as well, thus I don't have much to say about the soon-to-be almost curator of the clock at the center of the universe. There's an actual framework to be built upon when you put the galaxy's foremost and soon-to-be disgraced hero next to the one who would wind up taking his mantle and effectively becoming the light of the galaxy. Because, in truth, the story of Ratchet is also the story of Quark, as they both inspire the other throughout the whole of the first 4 games in the franchise. That Quark poster does have a point, hinting ever so silently that Ratchet does or did look up to the captain as a hero. If I ever get to Deadlock, there is a full circle moment that blows this point up to gargantuan size, and I bet a few of you can already see the through line with how the 4th game's plot is handled. It's what makes this story fascinating when you put it on the timeline, though that doesn't forgive the weaker parts of the characterization. Ratchet still sucks in this entry, and I think Insomniac knew that from the reception, as Going Commando's Ratchet is their effort in writing the ship. Swings and roundabouts though, I like Ratchet from 2 onward, and we wouldn't have that without the version of his character in 1. This is a style of graphic that honestly takes me back. No matter how long it's been, Ratchet & Clank's visual style harkens me to my younger years, where I spent renting out games for my PlayStation 2 and GameCube on the weekends. This and Sly Cooper 2 and 3 are what I think of when it comes to envisioning what exactly a PlayStation 2 game looks like. Bright, colorful, or stylized graphics, an imaginative world, and for some reason, anthropomorphic characters at the helm. I do think comparatively, Ratchet & Clank aged the worst out of Sly and Jack, particularly because I think the Sucker Punch and Naughty Dog mascots tend to have better lighting in their worlds. I distinctly think of mugshots and Miss Ruby's worlds from Sly that have moody-esque fuck lighting, and Jack 1's day-night cycle across the whole adventure instead of in sparsity, but take this as a nitpick because I love how unmistakable each world's identity is. That's where Ratchet and Clank sets itself apart from its contemporaries. The Lombax and his robot buddy don't stick to one planet, they hop from one to the next in their race against Drac. That means you see a whole plethora of biomes in varying states of flourishing and decay that lets you cast your mind into the ether to figure out how each planet works. Umbrus, Quark's HQ for the time being, is this battle-stricken hellhole, so perhaps the planet was always of a harsher climate, making it perfect for a testing grounds, or maybe some cataclysmic event shaped Umbrus into what it is now, and Quark is simply taking advantage of the desolation for a hideout. Heroes, even fake ones, have to have alone time as well, which, funnily enough, the planet casts doubt on Quark's nature before you get to the end. Why would a hero choose to live in a dump or have a base on a planet like Umbrus? It fits the vibes of a certain nefarious doctor who has yet to be introduced into the series. Going a step ahead, there are a ton of contrasts between the planets and even in their singularities. Cities like Metropolis, Blackwater, and Gorda run diametrically opposed to the likes of Veldin, Eudora, and Pokataru. Even though Ratchet and Clank isn't what I would call an environmentally minded story, as in it examines the effects highly technological races have on nature and what they do to help or hurt it, it pops up as a joke here or there, mostly with Drek and his shenanigans, but isn't a main talking point. There is a massive undercurrent of nature versus machine/technology that is non-verbally alluded to. One of the earliest planets to play around with the idea is Aridia. You have the metalworks factory looming in the background that you do get to jungle gym through, but you start off in the outskirts with the sand sharks and lush foliage. There is an antagonistic relationship between the two camps, not just visually and metaphorically speaking, as the main contrast on Aridia is the wide open space in the planet's wilds versus the cramped and confusing interior of the facility being built, but quite literally. The welder bots and sharks will infight if allowed, and some of the sand monsters have found their way inside the construction site like any pest would do. I guess arming the welders with flamethrowers works not just as a means to superheat and glue metal together for their job, but to turn them into amateur exterminators. Kill it with fire is a phrase after all. And yet with the likes of Ultanis, there is little to no nature to speak of. It's a bombed-out shell of concrete guarded by swarms of defender bots, specifically Zap kinds, with the only instance of nature's presence being the roaring thunderstorm that directly antagonizes Ratchet and Clank and the harsh winds in some sections of the city. It feels post-apocalyptic in more ways than what the Blarg's battlecruisers did to the planet. Like, Gorda City completely rejected nature in favor of the machine and is getting the worst storm ever for recompense. Yet still, Rilgar, the planet home to Blackwater City, is a display of man versus man as opposed to nature versus man. The strange amoeboid creatures running rampant in the streets are, or seemingly such, a side effect of advancement. Miniature Hedoras born from pollution that the city is having to mobilize against in a vain attempt to quell them. I've always speculated or theorized that whatever chemicals used by the exterminators to quash the amoeboids actually help spawn more of them, meaning Blackwater is fighting an endless war caused by themselves. Next time we see the city up your arsenal, there aren't any of the funky little boids anywhere as they've taken up residence in Nefarious's underwater base. So perhaps Blackwater became clean water. Setting aside theories and the straws they bring, not all the planets are robust in the way I've described the above. Gimlick and the Blarg Station are bare standard space stations with nothing really going for them. They're fun in the gameplay sense, but visually speaking, it's generic space corridors and halls with all that entails. I don't ask for every setting in space to look like the Ishimura or Sprawl, but I do have a preference for that. Thankfully, we're deep in that era of the third mascot boom. Ratchet and Clank is wonderfully animated both for our twosome, but also for what they go up against. Ratchet is a pretty sprightly guy, able to do some acrobatic endeavors while also busting out a mean breaststroke when he has to get around to swimming, and one of my favorite details for him is when he slams his Omni Wrench down for the Hyper Strike. He doesn't just swing the wrench down, it extends out and grows larger to place a bigger emphasis on the attack. And in conjunction with Clank, you have the likes of the long and high jumps, each with their own feel. The thruster pack long jump has Ratchet adopt a Superman double arms forward pose, as if the strength of Clank's thrusters are strong enough to propel him forward without any assistance, compared to the Helipack's long jump where Ratchet has to put in the legwork for it. One of these travels in a straight line, the other in arc. This tiny detail can also be seen when Ratchet double jumps, as the thruster pack fires off to give Ratchet a bit more height compared to when he double jumps without any pack on, or with the Helipack. Clank himself, while not as varied as Ratchet, isn't a slouch either. I always like the way he guides Gadgetbots by essentially focusing his mind, and his hover jump being the propeller that sticks out of his head is funny. Not to be outdone though, the cast of villains RNC fight through are a colorful bunch on both design and animation fronts. It speaks volumes that even the simplest of foes, the Robo-Dog fodder enemy, has thought and care put into how they interact within the game space. There's a good number of creatures that want Ratchet and Clank dead, so while I won't go through all of them, I'll hit the highlights. With the Robo-Dogs I've mentioned, they seem to get ahead of themselves when chasing after Ratchet. Instead of halting to a dead stop when within attack range of the Lombax, they skid on the ground like a dog incorrectly judging the distance of how far something is. Like, if you've ever seen a dog slip and slide on wood or tile flooring, that's what the Robo-Dogs do. The Sharkagators swim with utter grace when beneath the waves, but drain out their pools and they're left these waddling buffoons stripping away their malice. Or, if they're even unluckier, flopping around unable to breathe on land. The Robo-Guards, as seen near the end of the game, are probably the most detailed enemy, as they have specific cues for interacting with Ratchet when he's in and out of the disguise. That little hey they do when spotting Ratchet never fails to make me clinch, knowing that if they aren't swiftly dealt with, all hell is coming straight for Ratchet. Back to fodder, the pufferfish are my favorite, as they, the amoeboids and Robo-Dogs, don't reuse the same skeleton as the rest. They're unique in how they move and attack, as they hop around like a spinning ball of death. There's bound to be a favorite for everyone, like the Living Minds, the Gadgetron test dummies, the Logger bots, the mutants, and the list goes on. Moving on to voice work, I don't think Mikey Kelly and David Cade do a bad job as Ratchet and Clank respectively, but the writing is a tad weak for them. Kelly has the unceremonious job of having to speak some truly annoying lines as Ratchet, and David K's Clank hasn't gotten to the point of dry wittiness the character would be known for. This is clearly on the writing, as I said, though I do like this version of Quark. Jim Ward plays up the goofy Flash Gordon stylings of the character, but does leave a little bit of room for menace and conniving. It's weird not seeing Quark as the out-and-out idiot he would become, but Jim pulls it off.
Torturers, assassins, I'll tell you anything. Here, take my infobot. It's all I've got left.
Sir, we're not assassins.
Hold on. Let's see what he's got.
Has this ever happened to you? Hi, I'm Captain Quark, and believe me, there's nothing worse than staring down a Blargian snagglebeast from the inside and knowing your equipment isn't functioning properly. That's why I come to Al's Robo Shack for all my electronic needs. Al has been the exclusive repair shop for my super electro gadgets since I was knee-high to a sand mouse. If Al can't fix it, it's not broke. Right, Al? You said it, pal. So if you're fighting crime, or just fighting grime, come to Al's RoboShack in Metropolis for all your robotic repairs. Al's RoboShack, it's Quarktastic!
Do you know what this means?
Yeah, Captain Quark is really sold out.
No, it means Captain Quark is on Metropolis. We could tell him about this invasion.
If we had a ship.
What? A ship? What? You're not going to torture me? Well, as planetary chairman, I could arrange for you to borrow our courier ship.
Cool.
You can count on us, sir.
Right. Thank you, your chairman shipliness.
Kevin Michael Richardson, however, steals the show as Drek. Not only does the ever-increasingly narcissistic chairman get the funniest bits, KMR's self-important grandeur makes the character. The recorded message where Drek goes off script and starts scatting with fury is one of the best moments in the game for comedy.
I, Chairman Drek, have a solution. We are constructing a pristine new world using the choicest planetary components available. So, what does this mean to you, you might ask? Using highly sophisticated technology, which you couldn't possibly understand, we will be extracting a large portion of your planet and adding it to our new one. Unfortunately, this change in mass will cause your planet to spin out of control and drift into the sun, where it will explode into a flaming ball of gas. But, of course, sacrifices must be made. Thank you for your cooperation.
Cut!
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, sniveling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my... We're still on? Well, turn it off, you idiot!
Rounding out this solid section, while the sound design is punchy and effective, the music is where it's at. Like with Spyro 1 having the Police's Stuart Copeland, Ratchet and Clank has a well-renowned composer at the helm. David Berjou, aka Core. It's hard to describe the whole of the OST with one genre, as Core touches upon so many and blends them together masterfully. From the tense strings and raucous horns backed by a quick percussion within the Rilgar track, to the solid bass line and heady and abstract beats of Gaspar, to the droning and metallic hip-hop of Gimlick, Core's work speaks for himself. It's all fantastic and captures a solid identity for each world or segment a track plays during. It's a self-evident observation requiring little input for me, as like with a few ideas from this title, these soundtrack stylings would become a core pillar to the rest of the series. It's hard to pick a favorite track, not because none of them stand out, but because they all do something a bit different and have a shared level of quality. You have the more upbeat tracks like on Eudora, the fast-paced action romps with Umbrus, and the moody interludes of Orxon. It is a masterclass of composing, bumping the already great presentation a further step up. Ratchet and Clank is a third-person mascot platformer with some third-person shooter elements. The balance is really on the former half opposed to the latter, the inverse of what the franchise would become when going commando. On the difficulty side of things, while a few spikes exist from time to time, Ratchet and Clank is slower going. Heads up, there are 2 difficulty modes, though challenge mode is unlocked once you beat the game the first time through and isn't much different from the regular mode. You get bolts faster and any optional gadgets like the PDA or Persuader you keep when beginning challenge mode, and you keep health upgrades from the nanotech dispenser, but that's all the difference. No multipliers, enemy buffs, what have you. That out of the way, Ratchet and Clank's level progression is world-based. Typically, when landing on a planet, you have a set few objectives you need to complete to finish it out, and though some are optional, you do get bonus rewards or items for following every lead. Taking Poketaru as an example, it has 4 main objectives. Check out the resort, help the owner, get the thruster pack, and destroy the Blarg ships. Technically, you can consolidate them down to 2, get the thruster pack and help the resort owner, as checking out the resort, helping the owner, and destroying the ships are led into each other, but that's how the game lists them out. From there, you are mostly free to tackle what objective you want to do, as Ratchet and Clank takes the course format for its stages. On Poketaru, there is one main course that you follow down to get to the end of the stage. It involves following the owner, but for the likes of Metropolis or Blackwater, there's at least 2 you can follow. Generally, in this situation, each course leads down to an objective, like the sewers of Blackwater taking you to Quark, while the main entrance brings you to the hoverboard competition. So you can wind up doing the optional tasks first if you don't know what is main story content. That is, if you aren't locked out. While each planet is its own entity, there is some crossover in that to complete some planets, you have to have items from another. Back to Poketaru, you need to have completed Gaspar first to get the pilot helmet so you can control the ship on Poketaru to shoot down the Blarg ships. Structurally speaking, the game always gives you infobots, Ratchet and Clank's equivalents to gold stars for Mario, to a planet you'll need to complete to grab an item right when you need it. Example, on Batalia, 2 planets before Poketaru, you get the infobots for Orxon and Gaspar, the former giving you Poketaru's location for the O2 mask so you can finish Orxon, the latter giving you the pilot helmet so you can complete Poketaru. In simpler terms, Batalia, Gaspar, Orxon 1, Poketaru, Orxon 2. Now, while items and mostly infobots are given to you for free for simply beating a level, sometimes you'll have to pay with bolts, the game's currency. Bolts are found literally everywhere, as there are crates of varying degrees, wood that can be slapped freely, explosive that works like Crash's TNT boxes, and metal which need an explosive to blow up. Some breakable environmental objects have them, and enemies carry them. You can hold on to as much as you like, though you'll have to pay from time to further progress. As I've landed on character specifics, Ratchet has a pretty standard 3D mascot moveset. PlayStation 2 controller focused, left stick moves Ratchet, right stick the camera, X is jump, which does have double jump capabilities, and hovering when holding it down when equipped with either pack. Square swings the Omni Wrench up to a 3-hit combo. Hold triangle brings up the weapon/gadget quick select. Circle is fire, and the triggers and bumpers have different effects based on what you are currently doing. Without moving, R1 and 2 are crouch, allowing you to throw out the wrench if you hit R1 and square, high jump with R1 and X, or backflip with R1X and holding the stick back. Moving, hitting R1 and X performs a long jump as long as you have one of the packs. L1 and 2, meanwhile, are first-person view when you hold them down, with a few other buttons having specific actions when swimming, like rising, sinking, or activating the Hydro Pack. As you don't do that often, you have an oxygen meter to contend with when Ratchet doesn't have the O2 mask, it emptying leading to death, and not all water is swimmable. Unless you want to be eaten by a sharkigator, stick to pools that don't have that fin. They are equal to falling into a bottomless pit. On the topic of death, while rare as Ratchet is tanky, having 4 hits to start with and only losing 1 when hit with anything, some checkpoints are good, others bad. It depends on the planet, and Ratchet lacks a noticeable grace window when struck, so be careful when dealing with rapid fire attacks. The turrets on Gimlick, for example, can chew you up. Enemies come in many a flavor, from shooty boys to melee boys and everything in between. Health values also range, as the colloquially named fodder enemies usually go down in one from the wrench, but some higher tier fodder need more. You can always tell what an enemy is going to do when looking at them, whether to shoot or bite you, and there tends to be a balance in each world of having one main ranged enemy and one main melee enemy. This isn't always one-to-one or balanced. Eudora has 3 melee foes, the Logger bots, and 1 ranged one, the Blarg Scout, but there is always at least 1 shooter and 1 stabber. Novalis has the B-Dogs and Bazooka bots, Kerwan the Robo-Dogs and Blarg Troopers, Iridia the Sand Sharks and Welders, Umbris the Turrets and Mines, and the list goes on. However, evening the score against that gallery is Ratchet isn't always relegated to using his wrench as his main method of attack. All throughout the adventure are Gadgetron vendors that sell weapons. Unlocked in blocks, usually when you get to a new planet, Ratchet can purchase a weapon from the vendor if he has enough bolts, and these guns fulfill certain roles or archetypes, like a flamethrower clearing out smaller enemies, to a rocket launcher that deals big damage, or a defensive grid of drones that protect Ratchet. You don't have to buy a weapon if you don't want to, but other than purchasing story progression items and nanotech upgrades, health for the layman, there is nothing else that bolts do besides getting you weapons and ammo for said weapons. Ammo boxes do show up in the field if you're miserly, but their drops are random. Health boxes also exist and are the only way to recover health outside of reloading an area via the ship. Alongside the weapons are gadgets, though these are for puzzles, like the swing shot grapple points or trespassers circumventing trespass logs. Most of these are mandatory, like with the example I brought up with the pilot mask. From time to time, Clank will have to go out in Ratchet's stead. The Clank sections are more puzzly, as Clank guides Gadgetbots to open doors or fight tougher foes, seeing as Clank's 1-2 punch, while effective on tiny mobs, doesn't scratch the bigger threats. You'll also have to play some vehicle sections, like flying the fighter jet or racing on the hoverboard, which have their own control schemes, though you either have to destroy the specified objects when in the jet or win the race on the board. Ratchet and Clank is pretty cut and dry, though as this is an Insomniac title, there are some collectibles, particularly the gold bolts and returning skill points. Gold bolts are a secondary form of currency, as there are 40 in total scattered across the levels, a number needed alongside regular bolts to purchase the gold weapons from their associated shop. Gold weapons are all around much better than their silver counterparts, so it is advisable to search high and low for the gold bolts. Skill points, meanwhile, are little challenges the game gives you to do so you can unlock bonus material like behind the scenes footage, costumes, and cheats. The menu for these gets unlocked in challenge mode, and they run the gamut from relatively easy to somewhat challenging. On the PlayStation 2 original, these were only tracked by the game, but if you're playing the collection, some of the skill points get turned into trophies/achievements. It'd be a big shame if the weapons of Ratchet and Clank were bad. That would completely invalidate the whole purpose of the franchise and beg why the series made it past the initial planning stage, let alone this first game. Anyway, the weapons in Ratchet and Clank are not only extremely fun to use because of their multifarious abilities, but because with Future Sight you can see where the framework lies for weapons further along in Ratchet and Clank as a franchise. I can't help but gush over the wide sweeping ramifications like this, but I'll keep those praises brief as I want to keep it focused on this freshman outing. Basically, I can see where the idea for the likes of the Lava Gun, Mr. Zircon, and Dual Vipers came from when using the Tesla Claw, the Sand Mice, and the Blaster. From this debut, did Insomniac already understand what made a weapon good or fun to use, and what archetypes should be constants? Crowd clear, a high single damage shield, which is amazing as it usually takes 1 or 2 tries in a series for ideas to be fully solidified or understood. The core tenets for Devil May Cry didn't become truly codified until 3. To hit the bullseye at the start is applause-worthy. Now onto the guns themselves, as I don't want to be here all day complimenting their pedigree, as that is a comment more fitting for a retrospective. I'ma just go down the line of tools Ratchet gets his mitts on, as all except 2 are worth a gold star or whatever rating Gadgetron gives their successful products. For the starter pistol, the bomb glove isn't a part of Papa Perenzi's pea shooters and other associated annoyances lineup. It hurts. Shockingly so. It's a good, reliable warhorse that can be pulled out in almost any situation due to its pretty reasonable throw rate, the decent range and auto-tracking allowing it to hit targets consistently, and the splash mopping up groups. For a brief cutaway, all the gold variants effectively beef up their positives, so everything I say that's good is that much better when you shell out, except for any additional effects added, which I'll cover when I need to. The 2 faults of the bomb glove is that it performs poorly against aerial targets and when you're knee-deep in the dead. The first strike is a given, as it isn't unique to the bomb glove, as every glove and melee-centric gadget doesn't like hitting flyers. That's why there are other options that fire traditional projectiles. Strike 2, meanwhile, is tied to some of the jankiness of this first title. Ratchet doesn't tend to do well when anything is up in his grill because a lot of the weapon's lock-on doesn't function, and the Lombax has to either awkwardly swat away foes or attempt a hasty retreat. A problem not central to the bomb glove, but is kinda solved with the next gun, the Pyrocitor. As a video game flamethrower, while it is on the weaker side, the Pyrocitor nails that niche of close-range mob mauler. You don't have to think with it. Spray and pray like you're trying to clap a bug out of your headspace is its main usage, thus you do the circle dance. Spin around in a circle while firing the thrower has any unruly ne'er-do-well recoil in pain, giving you room to breathe. As most mobs tend to swarm, this burninates the whole lot, but even against tougher enemies, the Pyrocitor tends to loop with hit stun, giving you leeway. Thus, you can either hose a singular target down to ash, or keep a group preoccupied with the sensations of fiery pain. The main fault is the damage and range, as by endgame, Burnination was a mild aggregate if you could even get close enough, but there still tended to be fodder around to keep the cigarettes company. From close in the car to the grassy knoll afar, the blaster's low impact is offsetted by its considerable range and DPS. One of the few, if only, guns with the continuous modifier, the blaster lacks any kind of grace window when pelting a target. Some weapons have downtime before another shot can be fired, like the Devastator, while the other rapid-fire weapons like the Pyrocitor and Tesla Claw don't continually damage a creature, granting them a small window of invulnerability before they can be damaged again. The blaster bypasses all that because each shot from the gun is considered its own projectile. Add in its sizable effective range transforms the blaster into a low-caliber iteration of the Bozar. But there's a little sticker here on the side of the gun. Papa Perenzi. You ain't wiping out a small regiment with the blaster due to the low damage, but against solo targets where its lock-on can do its magic, or when sniping in first-person mode, the blaster's Thousand Needle impression makes it a useful sidearm to carry around in the galaxy. Upgrading it to gold grants it ricochet rounds for all your trick shot needs, giving it better crowd control. Back to the gloves, the Agents of Doom, or Glove of Doom, or whatever they go by in the later games, make up for their lack of airborne effectiveness by essentially allowing you to tarp hit whatever you see fit. A big old tank, a horde of street cleaners, throw out a pack or two of agents and they'll rip and tear until it's done. Deceptively strong and hungry for the blood of your enemies, the agents can clear out whole rooms with their nasty little chompers, provided you can keep the ammo stocked up. Once again stepping away from the tools of the trade, while a late-game add-on, the Gadgetron PDA is a massive game changer when you buy it. Having ammo purchasable on the go for a slightly inflated price remedies the low ammo count for the stingier guns like the Agents, Drones, Devastator, or Visibomb, while also topping up the more guzzling ones like the Parositor, Blaster, and Tesla Claw. A win-win all around as you become a walking arsenal not stringent to the regular ammo drops that can be uneven, or hounding after a physical vendor when deep in the bush. And by the time in challenge mode, you'll have all the weapons, thus removing any need of going to the vendors, keeping the action on the go with the PDA. Segue over, the Mine Glove functions as a side grade to Bomb, as statistically Mine throws slower and closer compared to the Originator, but hits far harder and has the adage of lingering hazards. I feel like out of all the weapons, the Mine Glove is excluded from the wonkiness plaguing Ratchet and his ability to confront enemies in this title, because missing a Mine Toss sets one up that'll immediately begin tracking whomever's on top of you. There's no reposition dance. Ammo is hard to waste with the mines as well, unless you go berserk with the 50 capacity gauntlet. Low-key making it, in my eyes, one of the underrated weapons of this first game, since it hits all the major boxes, but isn't as spectacular like the Devastator or Tesla Claw. Poketaru's swarm of annoying pufferfish fall hook, line, and sinker to the mines, and so does the host of mutated fauna of Orxon and the Gadgetron test dummies. Make no mistake, the Devastator is the flagship weapon of Ratchet and Clank. Get it? 'Cause it's on the box. Monster Hunter humor. There's not too wrong with the Devastator. It's a solid rocket launcher able to put a dent into anything. What's funny is that it functions also as a sniper rifle, the gun having far greater range than anything else Ratchet picks up besides the Visibomb and Rhino. You can safely deal with threats from miles away, aided by the Devastator's homing warheads. If you fire it in first person and have a red reticle on an enemy, the missile will hit its mark true. Though weak in the ammo department, having 20 rounds tops, it one-shots practically every infantry-level opponent, and what's more, the gold version splits off baby missiles to mop up anything still standing. It and the gold Tesla are gimmies for gold weapons, outpacing their brethren and contending with the Rhino. Though I didn't get it in this run, the Rhino is the definitive best weapon in the game. 50 rounds of high-grade ballistic missiles at your fingertips, ripping a new one, pun intended, into anything that comes across your field of view. It has the most generous lock-on out of all the weapons, and turns the already easy title into a firing range. The Rhino is a classic, making it one of the weapons to appear recurrently next to the Buzz Blades and Groovatron in later titles. But away with this retrospectiveness, the Suck Cannon is an economic weapon that is fun to finagle with. Anytime you see tiny mobs, it is worth busting it out, as sucked up foes are counted as dead by the game, and you get ammo for the cannon, which carries a pretty meaty blast. Sadly, my brain doesn't immediately jump to it when surrounded, as I probably could have saved myself a few headaches like on Hoven with the snow mites or the tracking mines. It does pay to remember what's in your arsenal so you can best approach a situation. Oh, and it only sucks up tiny enemies, nothing else. Continuing with the wacky weaponry, the Morpho Ray is a weapon that is, to me, what the definition of a Ratchet and Clank gun is. Requiring no ammo, thus making it quite effective against most threats, as long as you train the beam on them. Instead of blowing up enemies, it turns them into sheep that putt around harmlessly. It has that mixture of practicality like a lot of the good weapons, but it has that goofiness factor that makes it an oddity. Why incinerate your foes when transferring? God, I have that cursed knowledge. Someone save me. Them is a whole hell of a lot funnier. Doubly so as the gold morph creates giant chickens which explode and deal damage, making it a useful management weapon for both hordes and those moderate threats, as stronger foes do take a bit before getting changed. As I pull that railway spike out of my head, another unique tool of the trade is the Walloper, Ratchet's secondary melee option outside his wrench. Melee may seem a bit risky and isn't suitable for flyers or heavy machinery, but the Walloper punches above the wrench into heavyweight class, and some projectiles get eaten up by the electrostatic field when you wallop. It hurts and regularly doesn't knock out in one punch, fulfilling the ammo conservation purpose that Gadgetron built it for, but also making it viable for those with the daring do to get up close and personal with its high damage. Something I haven't mentioned as of yet is that bolts in this first title are scarce, as you can see how long it took me to try and build up for the Rhino and ultimately settle for the Gold Tesla and Devastator. That's another facet in the Walloper's corner. No ammo cost, meaning more bolts for other toys. It'll save you money in the long run, which is always good, as Devastator and Visibomb rockets aren't the cheapest. Even in my youth, I knew how great the Visibomb was, and I still have that appreciation for it. Not a weapon to use when getting ganged up on, the Visibomb grants you your own personal Predator missile to guide and annihilate foes from afar with. A bit facetious in my reference, the Visibomb wrecks anything it hits with its sizable explosion, making it a sniper's wet dream if they wanted more oomph in their payload. You can pre-explode the missile too, landing some tricky shots without putting yourself in danger. The Gimlick moon base is where the Visibomb shines, effortlessly taking out the stationary guns and roving jets in one hit, and from then onward, it should become a staple of your loadout. Some things you don't want to get close to. Last but not least, the drone shield, while a bit finicky because it sometimes doesn't want to target foes or waste itself on blocking projectiles, is Ratchet's proper defensive option. Generating around 8 drones, they hover around our Lombax until a threat is detected, where they will then zoom off and explode, hopefully taking down whatever was trying to hurt you. They aren't weak by any means, and one of the best features regarding the drones is that you can activate them from the pause menu as long as you have the ammo, and they'll stay active until each mini-bomb finds a target, you die, or you leave the planet. Magna boot sections force you down to the wrench, making combat in these moments awkward as you get locked in place while attacking, and there's some environmental hazards that float around on these pathways like bombs. The drones can be switched on before you hop on the path, or even while on it, sweeping away any enemies like the mutant birds on Orxon or the mines in the blasted city of Altanis, leaving you safe and sound as you tiptoe on the tight walks. The weapons in this game are just so good and hit the mark straight out of the gate, but so do the worlds. While I don't want to go into the same level or length as I did for the guns, each planet has its own identity, and you pretty much do something wildly different from planet to planet. So while the outline is the same for each, as in you have a main goal to accomplish that typically takes you throughout the world's course, what that might include is variable. The likes of Rilgar's sewer escapades leading to outracing the rising water before you drown, to the whole clanklessness of Altanis, where you see just how much the robot actually aids Ratchet when it comes to platforming, to the 2 penultimate stages dipping into stealth for a bit, and of course the Blarg research station on Orxon giving you a go as the sidekick for some puzzling and Gadgetbot wrangling. Ratchet and Clank feels like the continuation of ideas introduced in Spyro 2 and 3 with the little mini-games, backtracking, and breaks from traditional gameplay, but they feel more concise here. Less haphazard and, I don't want to go with the phrase pace-breaking, as the bits in Spyro 2 and 3 aren't long, so I'll go with unfocused. I've referenced it numerous times, or I hope, but the awfulness of Fracture Hills is the depths of Insomniac's early days hell with its bizarre structure and needing a revisit or two to fully complete. The only few bits of backtracking in Ratchet and Clank are for gold bolts, which are optional, and you can pick and choose which gold weapons you want to get, thus you don't need all of them unless you're Gerard. Does that joke still go over? Or when you have to do a fetch quest / grab an item to unstuck progress. In that latter case, there's 3, count them, 3 moments like that involving the O2 mask, Magna Boots, and Hologuise, though you wind up finishing other planets when searching for those items, unlike how the orbs and extra characters in Spyro 2 and 3 are essentially tacked on addendums to levels you've already cleared, and clearing Battaglia doesn't require you to enter the city and blow up the bombers, as that simply gets you the optional metal detector. And whenever you have to find an item for someone, Ratchet and Clank always gives you a teleporter back to that person, so this isn't like saving the Alchemist again in Hills so you can begin the Hunter portion of the objective when you have the Horn Bash. You skip all the fluff that's already been done before. Busy work has been lessened, and progress feels like it always moves forward, unlike how you could fall into the rut of revisiting like with the Spyro series. That's where my mild annoyance with the collectathon genre kinda creeps up into my critique, as it walks a tightrope with me because many a time I've dealt with my old nemesis backtracking, and thus I prefer mascot platformers that drop the collecting angle. See, well, this game and Sly Cooper. Characterization aside, as I don't feel like repeating myself wittingly, the singular worst part about Ratchet and Clank is the feel of play. Particularly, Ratchet's looseness can be a gripe. Before continuing, my side complaints here are two of the weapons: the Taunter and Decoy Glove. The Taunter is a joke weapon that deals no damage unless you lead enemies into traps or hazards. It has synergy with the Decoy Mine and Doom Gloves, but why add extra steps to an option that can be decreased to a singular course? Gun plus enemy equals death. Simple math. Same can be said about the Decoy Glove. If you want a defensive option, the mines, agents, and drones more than fulfill this classification while not skimping out on the pain. I also don't care for the real-time quick select, as it leaves Ratchet way too open when in combat, and it's one page big, thus you have to go into the pause menu to select some gadgets, but I digress. I've brought up combat quite frequently in regards to the plight of Ratchet's two left feet, but make no mistakes, this isn't isolated to one wing of the game. Platforming has its fair share of the problem as well. As you tend to get into gunfights more than acrobatics, Ratchet doesn't have traditional lock-on, strafe, workable strafe, or even a way to easily stare down enemies when engaging with them. So when parallel to a threat, you can banish them to whatever afterlife they believe in, but if they're ever just so slightly right or left from center, you have to take the radical option of fidgeting around until you can beat back on them. For the weapons with lock-on, this isn't as much of a problem as they tend to suffer from another one, but using the likes of the Pyrocitor, the Tesla Claw, the Morpho Ray, or any other weapon that shoots out a projectile but doesn't have an aiming reticle, prepare to readjust on hit as enemies tend to jump a bit when struck, or if there are more than two monsters wishing death on your person, as you will have to dodge and recite. The moon base has a perfect example of this imprecision, as you can see in my footage how all those fodder enemies are just chasing right after me, and my only real choice is to simply keep moving and hope to put some distance between them and me so I can give them an explosive handshake. The only two weapons that function slightly in these scenarios are the Mind Glove, because you can just go apeshit with it, and the Suck Cannon, though the Spaceballs joke does have limited capacity in the chamber, and gobbles up nothing bigger than fodder. Ratchet doesn't do too well under pressure, which is where the lock-on weapons suffer. There's an XCOM meme for this, but yeah, when anyone is bearing down on Ratchet, the lock-on weapons tend not to because there is a defined range for lock-on. Verisimilitude can be a tricky inclusion in a game. I've praised it before in the likes of Silent Hill for capturing that struggle you'd have as a regular person without firearms training dealing with nightmare creatures spawned from your own idiosyncrasies. In survival horror, having combat be clunky to simulate this character attribute works because these games tend to be slower. You can see this distillation between Resident Evil 7's gradual ramp up, where even then the biggest score of monsters you fight is around 5 or 2 biggins, and Resident Evil 8 where it comes out of the gate with a whole village. 7 is closer to survival horror, while 8 is horror action, distinguishing this separation by how Ethan feels to play as. He's much tighter in 8 because 7's slower, Ethan wouldn't stand a chance against the roaming packs. Thus bringing me to the conclusion and relating my analogy back to this game that Ratchet controls like a Resi 7 Ethan, but you're going up against a quite sizable force on average. Vitalia and the rest of the planets afterward compound this problem because you fight not just a number of enemies, but aggressive ones at that. The likes of the Hopping and Blard Commandos, the Living Mines, the Zapper Bots, any of the vehicles, and the sheer density of fodder that flip-flops between weak as wet paper towels and as durable as a normal enemy changes in what feels like every other stage, but all hit that critical weak point of Ratchet's poor maneuverability. He just doesn't have a good way to avoid attacks besides flailing about with jumps, as his land-based evasion abilities are nil. He has to turn away from a foe to avoid them, as the backflip is unintuitive, meaning you are either entirely set on attack or switch off to defense. No meshing of the two, hint hint, like a strafe, which means by the time you get back to attack, the enemy has already begun their cycle again. That's why fodder have the reputation that they do in this game, because they never let up to give you a chance to attack. And I was playing with a full deck. I had 8 hit points due to nanotech upgrades, but you have to pay out the wazoo for increased health. Your base amount is 4. I was struggling in the ruins of Ultanis with the Zapper Bots and their firing squad formation, so imagine a run through the planet with the minimum amount of max health and lacking certain weaponry. That's on the offensive front. Defensively, it's like a one-legged man strolling in a minefield. You can't afford to look away from the zappers to try and jump their beams, as that means turning the camera's focus away from them, but you can't let up on the damage because it's not like the forces of the universe will delete your enemies for you. A catch-22. That's alleviated either by fighting from outside an enemy's aggro range, which for some you can't, as detection and aggression have the same distance like the zappers, or by tanking hits, which, do I have to say how bad an option that is? The camera holds the blame alongside Ratchet's bumbliness, as it tends to shift to wherever his character model is looking, and movement for it is slow, there not being a button to recenter it, except for aiming in first person, which is a hold and stops Ratchet dead in his tracks, not feasible in a firefight. On the platforming side of things, Ratchet does carry momentum and has a pretty decent jump that's kneecapped by one of the worst standard double jumps I've seen. It takes any forward movement Ratchet has when he uses it, and you're better off either long jumping when you get it, or by sticking with the basic jump. It takes until Pokataru to get a double jump worth a damn, as the thruster pack augments that piece of Ratchet's kit, so I'm glad there isn't a section of a world without Clank dedicated to particularly hard ice platforming. I don't mean to hate on Ultanis, but it gets rough when going after the PDA, as you have an icy wind segment that is pinpoint platforming with a character that is already pretty woozy. Ice turns whatever momentum Ratchet can gain against him as merely thinking about jumping to change direction, so, you don't fall into the void. Has the Lombax sink like a stone, and you have to rely upon the slip and slide to make some jumps. A long drop greets you to a checkpoint in the middle of the shit. The one time where Ratchet and Clank's checkpoints are quite bad is on Ultanis, and to a lesser extent Hoven, as any devs during the stressful platforming sends you basically right back to the beginning. That's why I gave up on the slingshot bonanza on Ultanis, as one misstep and you go straight back to start with the gadget's fickle window of success under duress screaming at you in the face. Or if you get too hasty, you accidentally jumping off to your doom as you forgot to equip the blasted thing, as the slingshot doesn't auto-equip when jumping towards hook points. That's where this game really shows its age, as anytime you have to use a gadget like the Trespasser, the Slingshot, or the Hydro Displacer, you have to equip it beforehand either from the pause menu or by having the tool take up residence in the quick select. Residence that would be better spent on having specific counters to clusters like agents or the Walloper, but you never know when you might need any of the gadgets unless you commit to memory where exactly you have to pull them out. Basically, there's a bit too much middle management and having to constantly go back into the pause menu to switch things around to have a balance between weapons you regularly use and gadgets you might need. Rounding this off, my remaining dislike are the Trespasser puzzles, and it's mostly because I think I tended to solve them backwards. I never felt like I could get a grip on some of the later variations of the locks and defaulted to spinning rings until I lucked out with the right combination. I don't play many puzzle games, and I mostly suck when having to deal with one that has escaped that genre into another one. Don't get me started on how bad I am at dealing with the few of Twilight Princess's puzzles. But this is a personal problem that you probably won't be subject to. I spent all my points on endurance, not intelligence. While I may not like it as much compared to its successors, Ratchet & Clank 1 is still a solid experience top to bottom. The various guns, gadgets, and gizmos Ratchet acquires throughout the journey are so fun to use because of their unique approaches within combat or puzzle solving, and while the Lombax is a bit more bumbly compared to the tightness of going commando onward, it only becomes a big issue in some sequences like Ultanis' wind and ice platforming and some of the big battles. The world layout is top-notch, each planet having its own identity, and there's a willingness to experiment with gameplay ideas and switch it up, which is appreciated. And if you're coming into the series from this game, as I think you should, you can see which ideas were built upon going forward to finally tune Ratchet & Clank as a franchise. All I can end this with is, yeah, another banger from Insomniac. Ratchet & Clank 1 has definitely grown on me since the last few times I've played it. I don't know if that's because my negative opinions on the title have dulled over time, I can see past what I dislike about it to the good stuff, or if I've played worse games compared to this one, but I'm not as harsh on RC1 as I used to be. Spoilers, this, like Sonic Adventure 1, was a game I wanted to do way earlier in LTA's lifetime, but I ended up scrapping the original project. In fact, I covered the whole of the original quadrilogy from 1 to Deadlocked, but that all went down the gutter. Perhaps in the future, however. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, or don't. I ain't your Uncle Fester, and as always, this showing of Ratchet & Clank is over, but stay tuned for our next feature, the Metal Slug for Kiddlywinks, Lilo, and Stitch.